Troy Karen said, "I know the law." Judge Judy asked her to name one she couldn't. But what happened next shocked everyone in that courtroom, because this wasn't just about fines or painted doors. This was about a woman who'd been destroying lives for 6 years, collecting over $89,000 in illegal fines from 47 families, and she was about to learn that confidence without knowledge is just arrogance wearing a costume. The pale fluorescent lights of Judge Judy's courtroom hummed with their usual sterile persistence, casting everything in that particular shade of truth that makes lies impossible to hide. The air carried that distinct scent of old leather, furniture, polish, and something else. Something sharp and electric, the kind of tension that builds when justice is about to be served cold. This wasn't just any Tuesday morning at the studio. This was the kind of case that producers circled in red on their calendars, the kind that makes crew members text their friends to watch, the kind that would be replayed in law school classrooms and shared millions of times across social media. The gallery was packed shoulder to shoulder. Every seat claimed 30 minutes before filming began. These weren't just random audience members looking for free entertainment. Word had spread through the Meadowbrook Estates community like wildfire. 17 homeowners had driven 4 hours to be here, some taking vacation days from work, some bringing their spouses, all of them carrying the same expression, a mix of vindication and barely contained rage. They'd been waiting years for this moment, years of watching their neighbor, their HOA president, wield power like a weapon, turning their dream homes into anxiety-filled prisons where every mailbox, every paint color, every blade of grass too tall became another opportunity for a fine, another lecture, another threat. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of anticipation as people whispered to each other, sharing stories they'd never dared speak loudly before. On the wall behind the judge's bench hung the seal of justice, polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the room back at itself. The plaintiff and defendant tables stood like opposing trenches, separated by just 15 feet of carpet, but representing two completely different universes of understanding. The bailiff, a man who'd seen every variety of human foolishness parade through this courtroom, stood near the side door with his arms crossed, his face betraying nothing but his eyes. His eyes were alert, watching, waiting. Even he sensed this one was different. Judge Judy Schindlin's name didn't just appear on the placard at her bench. It radiated from every corner of the room, from the production crew who'd worked with her for over 2 decades, from the very walls that had absorbed her verdicts, her wisdom, her absolutely zero tolerance for nonsense. She was a legend. Not the soft, flattering kind, but the kind forged in family court trenches where she'd seen every manipulation, every lie, every abuse of power imaginable. 25 years as a family court judge in Manhattan, presiding over more than 20,000 cases, followed by a television career that turned her into the most watched person in daytime TV history. She wasn't famous for being nice. She was famous for being right, for cutting through deception like a scalpel through silk, for making entitled people face themselves in a mirror they couldn't look away from. Her reputation preceded her like a storm front, and anyone foolish enough to walk into her courtroom unprepared learned very quickly that charm, connections, and confidence meant absolutely nothing when matched against facts and law. The camera operators checked their equipment one final time, adjusting angles to capture every micro-expression, every moment of realization, every second of what they knew would be television gold. The red lights on 3 cameras blinked to life, silent witnesses to justice about to unfold. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The side door opened with a soft click that somehow managed to cut through the murmur of the crowd, and Patricia Whitmore entered the courtroom the way she'd entered every HOA meeting for the past 6 years, like she owned it. She didn't walk. She made an entrance, her heels clicking against the floor with the staccato rhythm of someone who'd practiced power poses in her mirror. She wore a designer blazer in cream, Chanel if the subtle interlocked C's on the buttons were authentic, and probably they were because Patricia never missed an opportunity to remind people that she had standards. The blazer was paired with perfectly pressed black slacks and a silk blouse in champagne that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payments. Her highlighted blonde hair was cut in that specific style, the kind that required a name. The Rachel, the Karen, no, this was the Patricia. A heavily layered bob that had been blown out to perfection that morning, each strand locked in place with enough hairspray to survive a Category 3 hurricane. She wore reading glasses on a gold chain around her neck, the kind of accessory that was meant to communicate sophistication, but instead screamed, "I'm about to lecture you." 3 rings decorated her fingers. Her wedding band, a diamond anniversary ring, and a gaudy cocktail ring with a stone so large it looked like costume jewelry even though it wasn't. Her wrist carried a Michael Kors watch in rose gold, and her nails were done in a French manicure so perfect it looked painful. But it was what she carried that told you everything you needed to know about Patricia Whitmore. Clutched against her chest like a legal shield, like a talisman of authority, like proof of righteousness, was a binder, not just any binder. This was a 3-inch black leather professional-grade binder with the words, Meadowbrook Estates HOA, embossed in gold lettering on the cover. It bristled with colored tabs, yellow, green, blue, pink, each one marking another section of what she believed was her unassailable documentation. Behind the binder she carried a second, smaller binder, and tucked under her arm was a manila envelope bulging with additional papers. She looked like a lawyer. She held herself like a lawyer. She had the confidence of someone walking into a fight they'd already won. The only problem was that Patricia Whitmore wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't even close. She was a 52-year-old former real estate agent who'd sold her last house in 2016 and decided that running her HOA was a better use of her time, or more accurately, a better outlet for her need to control everything within her line of sight. She'd been HOA president for 6 consecutive years, not because she was elected by overwhelming support, but because she ran unopposed after making the previous president's life so miserable with complaints and procedural challenges that he'd resigned just to escape her. Patricia didn't just show up to the plaintiff's table. She arranged herself, setting down the large binder with a decisive thump that was meant to intimidate, positioning the smaller binder at a precise 90-degree angle, placing the manila envelope just so. She produced a pen from her purse, one of those expensive rollerball pens that executives use to sign important documents, and set it parallel to her binders with the precision of someone setting a table for minor royalty. Then she adjusted her glasses, smoothed her blazer, and turned to look at the gallery behind her. Her eyes found her friend Deborah, sitting in the 3rd row, and she gave a small, confident smile and a subtle nod that said, "Watch this." Deborah smiled back, but even from across the room you could see the nervousness in it. The kind of smile that said, "I hope you know what you're doing," rather than "You've got this." Patricia then let her gaze drift to the defendant's table where it landed with all the warmth of a tax audit, and her expression shifted into something that could only be described as barely concealed contempt, the look you give someone who's wasted your valuable time. Who's made you drive all the way out here to explain basic concepts to people who should already understand them? She checked her watch, a gesture of impatience even though they were right on schedule, and exhaled softly as if already exhausted by the ordeal of having to educate everyone in this room. What Patricia Whitmore didn't know, what she couldn't know because she'd spent 6 years in an echo chamber where everyone was either too intimidated or too exhausted to challenge her, was that she was about to become a cautionary tale, about to have her false expertise dismantled piece by piece, about to learn the difference between having authority and having knowledge. And that lesson was going to be delivered by the one person in America you absolutely do not want to face unprepared. The bailiff stood straighter, his hand moving toward the door behind the bench, and the room fell into immediate silence. Even Patricia stopped arranging her papers, her hands freezing mid-adjustment as every eye turned toward that door. What came next was less an entrance and more the arrival of a force of nature. The door opened and Judge Judy Scheindlin walked in, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. She wore her signature judicial robe, black and crisp, but it was the way she wore it that mattered, not like a costume, but like armor, like a declaration. Beneath it you could see her trademark lace collar, white and delicate, a deceptive softness that framed a face that held no softness whatsoever. Her hair was styled in its familiar short, no-nonsense cut, every strand in place, practical and perfect. Her pearl earrings caught the light as she moved, small and elegant, the only jewelry she ever wore in court because she didn't need accessories to command respect. She earned it. Judge Judy didn't look at the gallery, didn't acknowledge the cameras, didn't smile or wave or perform any of the small social niceties that lubricate normal human interactions. She simply walked to her bench with a gait that suggested she'd made this walk 10,000 times, and every single one of those times she'd been the most prepared person in the room. She sat, adjusted her robe with one precise movement, and then only then did she look up. Her eyes swept the courtroom like searchlights, passing over the gallery, the bailiff, the court reporter, landing briefly on Patricia with her tower of binders, then moving to the defendant's table where a nervous-looking man in his 30s sat with a single thin folder, and then back to Patricia. The sweep took maybe 3 seconds. It felt like an hour. Judge Judy placed her hands flat on the bench in front of her, a gesture that looked casual but wasn't. It was the stance of someone planting their flag, claiming territory, establishing dominance before a single word was spoken. The silence stretched. Someone in the gallery shifted and the bench creaked like a gunshot. Patricia straightened in her chair, suddenly less confident, her hand moving unconsciously to touch her binder as if drawing strength from it. Judge Judy's expression didn't change. She didn't smile, didn't frown, didn't offer any read on what she was thinking. Her face was a mask of professional neutrality that somehow managed to communicate absolute authority. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the silence like a verdict. This is case number JJ2847, Patricia Whitmore versus Marcus Thompson, regarding alleged HOA violations and fines totaling $2,400. She paused, her eyes moving to Patricia. Ms. Whitmore, you're the plaintiff, which means you brought this case. You're also the HOA president, which means you think you have authority. Let me be very clear about something before we start. Another pause, this one deliberate, calculated to make everyone lean forward. This is not your neighborhood. This is not an HOA meeting where you get to make up rules and everyone has to smile and nod. This is my courtroom, and in my courtroom the only thing that matters is the law, not your feelings, not your binders full of printed emails, not how long you've been president of anything. The law. Do you understand the difference? Patricia's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Yes, Your Honor, of course I understand the law. That's exactly why I'm here, because Mr. Thompson has repeatedly violated. Judge Judy's hand came up, one finger raised, and Patricia stopped mid-sentence like she'd hit a wall. I didn't ask you to present your case yet. I asked you a yes or no question. Do you understand the difference between HOA rules and actual law? Patricia's face flushed slightly, a pink tinge creeping up her neck. Yes, Your Honor. Good. Now tell me what you're suing for. Patricia reached for her large binder, flipping it open with the confidence of someone about to prove a point. Your Honor, Mr. Thompson has violated HOA Code Section 7.3.4 by painting his front door an unauthorized color, specifically a shade of blue that is not within our approved color palette. He installed a mailbox that doesn't meet HOA specifications for size and style. He has repeatedly parked his vehicle in his driveway at an angle that violates our parking standards. And most egregiously, he built a raised garden bed without submitting the proper architectural approval forms. Each violation carries a $150 fine as outlined in our enforcement policy, totaling $2,400, which he has refused to pay despite multiple certified letters. She said it all in one breath, her voice taking on that particular tone of someone who's repeated these complaints so many times they've become scripture. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, her expression unchanged. How long have you been HOA president, Ms. Whitmore? 6 years, Your Honor. 6 years. And in those 6 years, how many people have you fined? Patricia hesitated just for a second. I don't have exact numbers. Ballpark, perhaps. 40 or 50 homeowners. 40 or 50? Judge Judy let that number hang in the air. Mr. Thompson, stand up. Marcus Thompson stood slowly, a thin man in his mid-30s wearing a simple button-down shirt and khakis. The kind of outfit someone wears when they're not trying to impress anyone, just trying to be taken seriously. His folder looked pathetic next to Patricia's arsenal of binders. Mr. Thompson, what do you do for a living? Judge Judy asked. I'm a software engineer, Your Honor. And how long have you lived in Meadowbrook Estates? 2 years and 4 months. In those 2 years and 4 months, how many times has Ms. Whitmore fined you? Marcus glanced at his folder. 16 times, Your Honor. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge Judy's eyebrow raised slightly. 16 times. That's one fine every 6 weeks. What's the total of all those fines? The total she's demanded is $8,600, Your Honor. I've paid $6,200 under protest because she threatened to put a lien on my house. This case is for the $2,400 in most recent fines that I'm refusing to pay. The murmur grew louder. Judge Judy's eyes snapped to Patricia, whose face had gone from pink to white. Ms. Whitmore, you told me the total was $2,400. You didn't mention you'd already collected over $6,000 from this man. Patricia's hands fluttered over her binders like nervous birds. Your Honor, those previous fines were for different violations. They're not part of this case. I was only addressing the current. You were only addressing what made you look reasonable. Judge Judy cut in, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. Let me ask you something else. You said you've fined 40 or 50 homeowners in 6 years. How much money total has your HOA collected in fines under your leadership? Patricia's eyes darted to her friend Deborah in the gallery. I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head. Ballpark. You like that word, right? You used it to describe violations in your letters to Mr. Thompson. Give me a ballpark. The silence was suffocating. Patricia licked her lips. Maybe 30 or 40,000? Try again. Judge Judy's voice was ice. And before you lie to me in my courtroom, understand that Mr. Thompson's attorneys subpoenaed your HOA financial records. I have them right here. She tapped a thin folder on her bench. So I'm going to ask you one more time. How much money has been collected in fines? Patricia's voice came out as barely a whisper. $89,400. The gallery exploded. People gasped. Someone shouted, "I knew it!" Another voice yelled, "That's my money." The bailiff had to step forward, raising his hand for silence. Judge Judy waited, letting the reaction play out for exactly 3 seconds before speaking again. And when she did, her voice could have frozen hell itself. $89,000. From 47 families. Over 6 years. For mailboxes and paint colors and garden beds. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on Patricia like a predator who'd just cornered its prey. Here's what's interesting, Ms. Whitmore. Mr. Thompson's attorney didn't just subpoena your financial records. He also pulled your HOA's original CC&Rs, your covenants, conditions, and restrictions. The actual legal document that homeowners sign when they purchase property in your neighborhood. Do you know what he found? Patricia said nothing. Her hands had stopped moving. She looked like she'd forgotten how to breathe. He found that 60% of the violations you've been fining people for aren't in the CC&Rs at all. They're rules you made up. Rules you decided on. Rules you enforced like they were law. So I'm going to ask you a very simple question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Judge Judy paused, and the entire courtroom held its breath. You've claimed multiple times in your letters to Mr. Thompson and in your opening statement to me that you know the law. So tell me, Ms. Whitmore, name one law, just one statute, one legal code that gives you the authority to fine someone $150 for planting flowers in their own yard. Patricia's mouth opened. Nothing came out. She looked down at her binders, her hands moving to flip through the pages, the tabs, the sections she'd organized so carefully. Yellow tab, property standards. Green tab, violation notices. Blue tab, email correspondence. Pink tab, board meeting minutes. Page after page of complaints. Photographs of mailboxes, printed Google Maps images with circles drawn around driveways. Spreadsheets tracking violation dates. But no laws. Not a single statute number. Not one legal code. Not even a county ordinance. Her fingers moved faster, more frantically, flipping past homeowner complaints. Past her own typed letters with phrases like, as HOA president, I have determined and the board has decided and failure to comply will result in. She could feel every eye in the courtroom on her. Could feel the weight of Judge Judy's stare. Could hear her own breathing getting faster. Your Honor, the HOA operates under the authority granted in the CC&Rs, and as president I have the right to enforce. I didn't ask about your HOA. I didn't ask about CC&Rs. I asked you to name a law. One law. Patricia's hands stilled on the pages. The silence stretched like taffy, pulling thinner and thinner until everyone thought it would snap. The HOA law gives us... There is no HOA law, Judge Judy said flatly. HOAs are private organizations that can enforce reasonable restrictions that are clearly written in properly filed CC&Rs. They are not governments. They cannot create laws. They can only enforce what homeowners contractually agreed to. And even then, only if those restrictions don't violate actual law. You don't know this, do you? Patricia's voice came out small, defeated. Your Honor, I've been doing this for 6 years. 6 years of being wrong doesn't make you right. It makes you a bully with a gavel. Judge Judy pulled off her glasses, setting them on the bench with a soft click that sounded like a cell door closing. Here's my ruling. You owe Mr. Thompson $8,600, the full amount of every fine you've collected from him. Because 60% of your violations aren't valid, and the other 40% were enforced selectively and excessively, you also owe him $400 for his attorney fees and his time off work for this nonsense. Total judgment $10,000. Furthermore, I'm ordering you to provide a full accounting of every fine collected during your tenure to every homeowner in your HOA within 30 days. And they should lawyer up because you're about to get sued by 46 more families. The gavel came down like thunder. Patricia sat frozen, her binders suddenly nothing more than expensive kindling. Marcus Thompson closed his folder, a small smile finally crossing his face. If you're sitting there thinking, finally someone held an HOA tyrant accountable, then hit that like button right now because that little thumbs up tells us you want more of these justice stories. The courtroom doors hadn't even closed before Patricia's phone started buzzing. Text messages from neighbors who'd watched the live taping. 43 messages in the first 10 minutes. Her friend Deborah walked 3 steps behind her in the hallway. Silent, no longer offering comfort because what comfort could possibly exist after that? Within 6 hours of the episode airing, the Meadowbrook Estates Facebook group had 312 new posts. Homeowners who'd paid fines for unauthorized wreaths and improper hedge heights and lawn ornaments exceeding size restrictions came out of the woodwork like survivors finally safe to tell their stories. Someone created a spreadsheet, 47 families, $89,400 in fines, and now they had Judge Judy's verdict as ammunition. A class action lawsuit was filed within 3 weeks. Patricia Whitmore resigned as HOA president 4 days after the episode aired. Her letter citing health reasons, when everyone knew the real reason was that she couldn't show her face at another board meeting. The new HOA president was a retired paralegal who actually understood the law, who reduced fees by 40%, who implemented actual democratic voting, who focused on real community issues like fixing streetlights instead of measuring the blue content in someone's front door paint. Marcus Thompson planted an even bigger garden. He painted his shutters to match his door. He installed a bird feeder that Patricia would have fined him $300 for. And every morning when he checked his mail, he smiled, because the mailbox that had caused so much trouble was still there, and nobody was coming to fine him for it. Property values in Meadowbrook Estates didn't plummet like Patricia had warned. They went up. Turns out people like living in neighborhoods where they're not terrified of their own HOA. The clip of Judge Judy asking name one law hit 6.2 million views in 2 weeks, spawning hundreds of TikToks, becoming a rallying cry for homeowners across America who were tired of petty tyrants with binders pretending authority was the same as knowledge. And that's the story of how 3 words destroyed a 6-year reign of suburban tyranny. If this video gave you that sweet, sweet justice satisfaction, make sure you're subscribed because we've got dozens more stories like this coming your way. Smash that like button if you think every HOA Karen needs a Judge Judy reality check, and drop a comment telling us your worst HOA horror story. We read every single one, and your story might be featured in our next video. Check out the video in the description about the entitled parent who tried to scam a veteran out of his service dog. Trust me, the karma in that one is absolutely chef's kiss. Thanks for watching, and remember, confidence without knowledge is just arrogance in a blazer. See you in the next one.